Welcome to the Women's Money Wisdom Podcast. I'm Melissa Joy, a certified financial planner and the founder of Pearl Planning. My goal is to help you streamline and organize your finances, navigate big money decisions with confidence, and be strategic in order to grow your wealth. As a woman, you work hard for your money, and I'm here to help you make the most of it. Now, let's get into the show. Welcome back to the Women's Money Wisdom Podcast. If you are concerned about the impact of AI and how it could impact you with fraud and scams, then you come to the right place. And if you're not, you probably are going to listen to this episode and both perhaps have a little more anxiety, but also have more confidence that there could be solutions to help protect you from scams and frauds in the digital age. I am joined by guest Patrick Coughlin. He is the CEO of Savi Security and also the author of The Dark Side of the Boom: How Scammers Hijacked the AI Revolution, which is a brand new book issued this year. And after building and selling a cybersecurity company to Splunk, Patrick shifted his focus to protecting everyday families because of a deeply personal story. And I'm going to let him tell the story, but Patrick, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Melissa.
I'm so glad that you're here. You are a cybersecurity expert and were a security expert before that, right? And has spent a lot of time protecting big assets and companies from scams and fraud. But today you are going to market with a product that's here to help people like me and our listeners. Can you tell me a little bit about that evolution and what brought you to where Savi is today?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you sort of look back at my career, there's really one thread that runs through the whole thing, which is trying to understand how bad guys, as my 5-year-old son would call them, bad guys, use technology to do harm. And in the early days of my career, I was focused on national security threats. I spent a lot of time in places like Iraq and Afghanistan and all over the Middle East, looking at how different groups were using technology. Then I pivoted to focused on enterprises, large Fortune 500 companies, and how we can better defend their digital networks from cyber criminals and hackers.
Mm-hmm.
About 2 years ago, my mom, little old Beth Coughlin from Kansas City, got a very sophisticated fake kidnapping scam that was targeted at her. And so essentially what happened was she answers the phone one evening. It looks like my sister, her daughter, is calling her, says Courtney is calling, just like it always did. She answers the phone. She hears what she swears was my sister's voice say, "Mom, they've got me. Help. I'm at the local Walmart in Olathe, Kansas," which you may know, Melissa.
We're both from Kansas City, so Olathe is right down the road, right?
Yeah. And then a man's voice comes on the phone and says, "We've got your daughter, and we're gonna kill her in the parking lot of Walmart if you don't send money right now." And so the way my mom tells the story is she immediately goes into protector mode. As I imagine, many in your audience know what that feels like, going into protector mode. And she, grabs her purse, starts to put on her coat. The man is yelling at her PayPal instructions for how to send money. And she turns and looks on the dining room table and sees her iPad. And so luckily enough, she picks that up while she's on the phone, texts my brother-in-law saying, "Where's Courtney? What are we going to do?" Still thinking the ruse is completely real.
Right. The element of surprise really helps, right? To just, you're an animal with instincts, your mother protecting the herd.
Yes.
So,
yes. And that's, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but that's exactly what the scammers are targeting in those moments is your emotions, and how do they overwhelm logical and rational thinking by triggering other parts of your brain that drive these emotional responses and sort of crowd out the rational. But luckily my brother-in-law responds immediately and says, what are you talking about? Courtney's here. She's in the shower. And so in that moment, my mom gets this sort of second opinion, something that breaks the scammer's spell. And she's able to sort of step away from it, recognize this may not be real, hangs up the phone, calls my brother-in-law, makes him put Courtney on the phone, and then realizes something's not right. She calls me. And what's going through my mind in the moment, Melissa, is one, how do we sort of calm down my mom? Because this is
Mhm.
totally traumatic and a very, from her perspective, everything on that call was fake, but the emotions,
So personal.
yeah. And so calm down, mom, make sure she's feeling okay. But then as the cybersecurity researcher in my head, I'm thinking, what has fundamentally changed here? That the sophistication that I used to see was
Mhm.
preserved for three-letter government agencies and large Fortune 500 companies in terms of how they personalize and target these attacks is now happening to little old Beth Coughlin from Kansas. And what does that mean about who else is being targeted and where this threat is going over time?
Yeah, so much to ponder, and I've heard of these scams and so many others, nowadays, and so with your expertise and your entrepreneurial skill, what what is next? How can we protect Beth and all of our, loved ones, including ourselves?
Yeah, yeah. And so, I mean, that question is what ultimately led me to write the book Dark Side of the Boom, which captured a couple of years of research into how these scam groups are operating. What are the tools that they're using? How are they doing each stage of their campaigns now with more AI weaved into the operations that they're running? And what does that mean for victims and everyday people? And what can we expect in terms of how scams and fraud are going to continue to evolve? And what I learned was impossible to ignore. The data
Mhm.
is off the charts. Digital fraud is now estimated to cost Americans in this country almost $200 billion a year.
Wow.
The number of attacks that have resulted in over $100,000 losses in a single incident, those have grown by eightfold since the launch of ChatGPT just a few years ago.
Hmm.
We are in an epidemic here of scams. It's now the fastest growing crime in the country. It's also the largest economic crime in this country when we think about that $200 billion number.
Mhm.
So we have so much work to do for the consumer around how do we bring more tools to this problem so that we can arm the consumer, we can arm families with more sophisticated cybersecurity in the face of this changing and increasingly sophisticated cyber threat. So for me, it wasn't enough just to write the book. We started the company called Savi Security with my brother, keeping it in the family. My brother has a great background in consumer products at places like Apple and Spotify, and I've got expertise in cybersecurity. So we figured if we could bring those two things together,
Mhm.
we can build better products and better protection for families in this AI era that we're living
Well, I'm curious before we get into some of the ways you can protect yourself. I mean, first of all, I know as a small business owner, a significant part of my technology budget is toward protecting our company and our clients, and especially because we deal with personally identifiable information.
in.
Um, and the gap, knowing like the training we have to do every month, that I have a 24/7 team who calls us if somebody clicks on the wrong place. You It's so easy to recognize that gap, and we're going to talk more about how you can protect yourself on the personal level, because there's no technology budget for cyber in grandma's retirement accounts or your own, because there's not an age an age minimum for you to be vulnerable.
That's right.
But before we go there, I was just curious, in your research, like, who's on the other end of the line? Obviously, it's a computer simulating some of the things that reaches out to Beth, but uh, is this a state actor? Is this a criminal enterprise? Like, who is out there on the other end and targeting Beth in Kansas City?
It's a really good question, and it was a key part of my learning as I sort of went to the seedy underbelly of the internet and where these scam groups and cyber criminal organizations are operating and trying to understand the who is behind this. And there's a chapter
Mhm.
of the book that we call the five families of fraud to try to and using sort of like a Sopranos or reference there to
Yeah.
help bring to life the different types of organizations here. It's a bit of um, a trick that we use. Of course, there's more than just 5 of these types that are
Right.
out there, but we essentially travel around the world in the book, and we look at prototypical scam groups in Eastern Europe, in Southeast Asia, in West Africa, which was the original home of the Nigerian prince email scams from the early 2000s, if you remember.
Mhm.
And we also look at homegrown threats that are coming out of organized crime groups in North America. And what we find is each of these geographical locations typically has specialties and the types of scams that they will do. It's not always true, but it's helpful to think about how these groups operate. And they specialize just like, any other business would specialize in a service offering, except their customers are victims. And
Mm.
they really do run these organizations like a business where there are humans behind it, of course, just like there are humans behind every business here in the US. But increasingly, those humans are using technology to make their scams more personalized, more convincing, more sophisticated, and more scalable.
Right, it's increasing the at bats, right? Like, they if Beth figures it out, that's okay because she's not their only victim that day.
That's right. That's right. And we have to be right every time, but they only have to be right once to get paid.
Mm.
And so what we found is this generation of AI tools that is taking the markets by storm. I'm sure you as a financial planner are following all the markets around AI and the boom that we're living.
Right.
Um, these tools are incredibly good at talking like us
Mhm.
and behaving like us. If you've played with them, you've got to see, and in some ways, they're almost magical and kind of how they can speak and talk like us. Well, that makes them useful for things like taking actions on our behalf for sure. It can make us more productive. They're also incredibly useful for deceiving us because they
Mhm.
can act and behave and sound like us. And so that makes them the dream tool for cyber criminals, for con artists, for the imposter scammers that are out there who are essentially trying to convince you they are somebody that they are not in order
Right.
to get you to do something against your financial interests.
Well, I'm gonna just pause there. Like, we're both recording a, video podcast where for listeners that are only on audio, there's also a YouTube video version, and we're using our, you know, voice, image, likeness in here. With that knowledge, what makes you comfortable? Because I have friends who are like, "I will not record anymore because I don't want to be lost," but, it would be very difficult to erase your digital, thumbprint. Are you still willing to do this? Obviously, you are.
Yeah, and I mean, look, there is at this point you can clone a voice, an AI
Mhm.
clone voice off of just a couple of seconds of audio. You don't need a
I mean, we all leave voicemails. There's you answer your phone and don't know who it is.
those
Like,
wrong
there's all
number
sorts of things.
calls. So somebody's, you can't hear anybody. You say, "Who is this?" You ask a few questions. Today, that's already enough to clone a voice.
Mhm.
So the technology is getting so good that you don't even need these sort of long form content out there to create an avatar of Patrick and his voice and his likeness. And so that's why we focus at Savvy on how do we sort of detect scammer behavior
Mm.
rather than trying to put up more walls around all of us in the digital universe, which, we have to be smart. We have to be aware of how we engage online and
Mhm.
recognize the threats that are out there. But I think the worst outcome from all of this scam behavior and spam and AI slop that's out there would be that we all just kind of throw up our hands and throw our devices in the trash and retreat and isolate ourselves because
Mhm.
the power of technology and the promise of technology is that it can connect us better. It can make us more productive. We can communicate in new ways. We can be entertained in new ways. And some of those are incredibly valuable to moving society forward. and to giving us a different kind of quality of life. I mean, I think about things like FaceTime. I live in Los Angeles. My mom still lives in Kansas City. What FaceTime has done for our relationship, for her relationship with her grandson in terms of connectivity is super powerful, right? And so there's
Right.
upside to technology, and we can't let the bad guys win, the scammers win, if we just say, well, they're flooding our channels too much and we're going to throw these things in the trash. And so that's why we wrote the book, to raise awareness around the issues. And that's why we're building new tools and better solutions to help protect families.
I mean, I think about it, and Beth was both a victim because of access to technology, but she also used technology to protect herself by immediately being able to reach out to family members. So it works both ways.
That's right. That's right. And there are things we can do here. This is not a hopeless story. The book is not a diatribe against technology. While we do, I like to think, take a hard look at the AI builders, the telecommunications infrastructure, the social media platforms that are often complicit, or at least look the other way at times, as
Mhm.
deceit gets trafficked to our front door, to our phone, to our inboxes, to our DMs. And we do take a hard look at that. And there are things that we can do from a policy perspective and a responsibility perspective as citizens of this country, I think, to do better there. There are also things we can do in the family. We can create new rituals. We can create a family code word, for example, is something that we recommend in the book, which is a secret word that is only known to you and your family members. Um, what that does is it starts a conversation around, there may be scenarios where we need to verify who we are that we
Right.
can't anticipate right now. And then you start talking about those scenarios. What might that be? And practice where you might need to use this with your kids, with your aging parents, with your partner. And all of a sudden you're talking in a new way about this new world that we live in, and the realities of the technology today. And so sometimes just little steps like creating a family code word can
Okay.
can start the conversation making, for sure. But there's
So the family code word is one good like hygiene or, kind of preparedness. I'm assuming for like, hey, is this really you? Like, can you give me the family code word? Whatever, what's our coat of arms? And then
yeah.
everybody's decided what it is. What are some of the other, things you could be doing as a human?
Yeah.
And then also technology solutions, since, that's one of the areas that you've kind of pivoted to solve for.
Yeah. And I also think it's important to do it in family. It's important to do in the places where trust exists for the family. I think about
Mhm.
financial planners and the role that you all play in so many families around the country and around the world, and really being a trusted advisor to folks in retirement. And so, um, I think it's a super relevant conversation for not just the family, but the people that interact with the family. And
For sure, and if I could just interrupt there, having a conversation with your financial professional about who is a trusted contact that if I so I haven't had this situation for my own clients, but I have a friend who's an advisor and her client was getting romance scammed. And she knew it because of a change in behavior in terms of how he was asking for money. And it fortunately had gotten permission to have a trusted contact, and who is this, where we don't give that person authorization to act on their behalf, but they are someone that we have permission, or she had permission to reach out to and say, you need to investigate because this strange behavior is occurring. And in fact, the securities industry is going further to have, especially for seniors, uh, the ability to not take client instructions if you believe that they've been compromised and are being having fraud occur. So, the human element comes with a cost. So most financial advice from a human also has a price tag that is certainly worthy of, assessing the value, but it also does come with years, in many cases, of knowledge of customer, consumer, client behavior that can be protective, as well as policies and procedures, where you're not just calling an 800 line in order to ask for some money. to be sent. There's some human knowledge of your behaviors and who you are and how you operate.
That's right. And I think what you just identified is a great example of the other behavior that we really recommend, which is around a second channel check. So
Mhm.
if you find yourself in a situation that we call a hot zone situation, which typically includes some sort of unfamiliar contact or out,
Mhm.
it includes the extreme sense of urgency around, a real fear. You're going to lose money. You're going to miss an opportunity to make money. Somebody's going to get hurt that you love, uh, combined with an ask for money. And those three things are the ingredients of a hot zone moment that scammers you, regardless of what the scam type is, regardless of where it emanates from in the world. It typically includes that combination of ingredients. And so,
Yeah, with often a trusted, like, yours was a family member as a employer, like something that looks like it came from your manager, where, especially if you're a newer employee, where you don't know their behaviors and you're looking to impress, and like, oh, I'll hop to it and get it done.
that's right. And these imposter scams, as we call them, which went from being just a blip on the radar a few years ago in terms of the type of fraud that were out there, to now being the number one officially reported scam and fraud in this country, hitting consumers in 2025, making up 33% of all scams out there, is these imposter scams where they pretend to be somebody that you trust, love,
Mhm.
or care for, or may fall in love with, to your point around a romance scam.
Mhm.
And the role that AI plays in making that more convincing. So when you find yourself in those situations, if you get a call from your bank's fraud department, as we tell the story of Daniel, who's in the book, who's a young, talented, brilliant software engineer working in tech, who's also, a committed saver, building up wants to retire early, doing everything right. And then, of course, when his phone rings and it looks like it's coming from his bank's fraud department, and they tell him that there's been suspicious activity in his account, the one thing he hasn't put into his savings model is some sort of big fraud incident, and he
Right.
immediately panics and complies with every instruction that they say on the phone.
What are the
And of
next
course,
questions? Like, can you give me your username and password so we can fix this? Or what are they?
exactly. Okay,
Or
you're
go
gonna
to
get
this link
going.
and log in.
That's right. Or you may get a code now. I want you to read to
Mhm.
me the code. But what that person's actually doing is then using that to get into your account. And so we have to have new ways to verify in this new world. We have to build new ways of trust. And your point around leveraging relationships with financial planners and wealth advisors and what they bring to the table in terms of trust and second opinions that can really be helpful in these moments that matter. But there are other ways too. When you get that call from your bank, flip over your card and call the number back that's on the back of your card, right? Rather
Mhm.
than just trusting what came in and what the caller ID said. Because let me tell you, caller ID is an editable field.
Mm.
It is not to be trusted. We've done a ton of work on the telecommunications infrastructure. We know how easy it is to fake that. So, flip your card over, call the number that's on the back of your card for your bank. Um, Turn to somebody, ask somebody you trust, ask somebody you love, saying, "Does this sound right to you? Have a look at this."
Mhm.
Or if none of those are a really clear option, or you don't know what the second channel verification may look like, that's why we built a free product called Scamwise, which is available at scamwise.com. It's a website. You don't have to pay for it. It's totally free. It's a free scam checker. You don't even have to put in an email address, so you don't have to worry about user data or things like that. You can submit a screenshot of a text. You could forward an email to it. It's submit@scamwise.com. You could take a picture of physical mail. We get a lot of that. This traffic citation doesn't look, I don't remember this, or
Yeah,
this
that's
don't,
right. The toll text, right?
the toll tax, the jury summons is a big one going around
Mhm.
right now, a fake jury summons, and then a fee or a fine associated with not showing up, that turns out to be completely bogus.
Recaptcha
So
scams too nowadays. Like, my IT company is telling us that they're getting those weekly,
So
from their
many fake
clients.
ads that show up on Instagram for a cool product that looks like it's an extreme discount that's too good to be true, and you click on it and you get sent to some shopping website, those URLs. So you can submit all of this to Scamwise. and get a quick second opinion. And we'll tell you what, what makes it suspicious or legit looking. And then we'll also recommend specific steps that you can take to verify. And so we put that out there 4 months ago, in March, and we're getting tens of thousands of submissions a week from all over the country of people who are looking for a second channel check, a second opinion about a particular message. And
That's
and and so
fantastic.
finding ways to build into your behavior new rituals around verification and trust checking is going to be so important to our success in this AI era.
So tell me a little bit more if people are interested in protecting themselves at a higher level, is there anything more they could be doing?
Yeah. Yeah, and of course we're putting out more products from Savi, so Savi security.com. If you're interested in doing more, you can visit us there. We've got apps now in the App Store for Apple and Android phones that provide text message filtering. So
Mm.
interestingly, SMS and text, you mentioned sort of the toll scams. SMS and text messages just surpassed email for the first time ever as the number one most popular phishing vector for consumers.
I'm surprised it
Forever.
took that long, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah, well, forever it was email. And email still is right up there. It's a
Yeah.
huge problem. But text is now the number one. And so we've got to do more to filter out suspicious looking text messages. We offer
Mm.
call protection features. So the ability, like, I don't know about you, but my voicemail is like a mess on my phone. So we do analysis of what 'cause
Yep.
scammers love to hide in voicemails, particularly for senior citizens, and sort of claim, leave a very urgent sounding message from the IRS or from somebody that you trust saying you got to call back now. And of course, once they got you on the phone, they start to put their emotional hooks into you. So cleaning up voicemail, you can add Savvy to a call now. So if you find
Mm.
yourself on a suspicious call or something that just doesn't sound right, like my mom's call or any call, by the way, they all get through these different platforms, and you will find yourself on a suspicious sounding call. You can add Savvy to the call. It will listen for the first 30 seconds and it will send you a verdict about the suspiciousness of that call and recommend next steps, just like we would on ScamWise. So we've got capabilities if you want to take more steps around securing not just yourself, but your loved one, your aging parents, your teenage kids who are onboarding to the digital world. We believe at Savvy that security is a shared experience. My
Mm.
exposure is no different than my wife's, who's got the same access to my bank account. If my mom had been scammed for a lot of money, that would have had a big impact on my financial
For
future,
sure.
and the caregiving role that so many people play for our aging parents. And so our mission at SAB is not just how do we build better protection for the individual and people who, unfortunately all too often look like me and have a background like mine in cybersecurity, but how do we build it for a broader tent of people that need protection in this new era?
I before we wrap up, we're running out of time, but I wanted to ask, you've mentioned your 5-year-old, and I find, in some ways so I have, 2 teenagers, had to change that, the tween turned into a teen recently, and, in some ways, they're so much smarter than us, and in other ways, they still have a, undeveloped prefrontal cortex, and their impulse control is low. So, how do you protect an emerging adult or someone who now maybe have access to funds, but also, like, may more easily fall for the trick of like, "Hey, give me some information about you, for a free coupon, or we'll send you something cheap," or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's the data about this generation of teenagers and young people coming online in terms of the volume of scams that they're getting is off the charts. We always think
Mm.
about senior citizens. That's because they're the ones losing the most money,
Right, there's a
because they
smaller
have
bank
the
account
most money.
attached. Yeah.
But if you look at the volume stats in terms of where scams are actually happening the most frequently, it's in the younger generations. They
Hmm.
just don't have as much money to lose typically. but they're getting hit on their messaging platforms, on Snapchat, on gaming platforms like Roblox, as they get a little older, on dating platforms. So it's everywhere for the digital native generations that come online. I would say my point about family rituals applies here, which is it starts with talking about this and removing this concept of shame from being scammed. Because the reality is the scammers are really good at their jobs and we need to give them more credit and more blame and start talking about the scenarios that are out there so that in the hopes of that young people recognize the threats that are out there. But more than that, that they're not afraid to talk to you about it when something may seem off or if they have gotten themselves in a difficult situation in a scam. And so, talking about these things, saying to our kids, look, there's a rule in this house. We never send money to a stranger that we've never met online without talking to each other about it. And I'm never going to do that. Lead with the behavior. I make a promise that I'm not going to do that. And so we're not going to do that as a family. And why? Why aren't we doing that? Well, here's the kind of threats that we're finding out there. So I find that just starting the conversation, making this what used to be an issue that was only talked about in windowless conference rooms in DC or in boardrooms of the Fortune 500, how do we make this a living room and a kitchen table issue is going to be the way that we build better protection for families.
So true. Talking about like, hey, mistakes happen. Raise your hand earlier if you don't. And also, I think like once they figure out that you're a vulnerable person who's willing to click, then you become more vulnerable. So, if you're listening, ask your parents, do you think you've fallen in? Has something happened that, like you don't want to tell me about? Like would be good, normal conversations to have and say, it's okay if, even if it's in the thousands, if you lost some money, like I want to know because then we can help protect you from the next thing.
Absolutely.
And I think it's so important. I heard someone mention recently that we did more to overprotect our children in the physical world than like you and I probably grew up with.
Yeah.
And then we left them open in the digital world, and it should have been reversed where there's more chances to skin your knee in
That's
the
right.
actual playground and in that digital playground that we need more safeguards.
That's right. I mean, I think about when I was growing up, and you may have had something similar, in Kansas City. My parents told me, look, if you ever find yourself when I was a teenager, if you find yourself at a party and you don't know how to get home,
Yeah.
you can always call us. You can always
like
call
no
us.
questions asked.
No
we'll pick you up.
asked.
We may have a conversation later,
We
but
have a conversation later, which we always did.
Yes.
As I did make a few of those calls, but those kinds of conversations introduce the topic and the concern around things like drunk driving or fears, and now you're talking about it. How do we have similar conversations in digital spaces and in the online world where we are doing so much communication, entertainment, and commerce today? We've got to find ways to talk about it, and hopefully the book, the work we're doing with Scamwise and Savi helps give parents new tools to do that.
I love that. So tell us, Patrick, well, first of all, congratulations on all the work that you've done so far. Where can people find the book? Remind us where to go if you're vetting a scam, and then tell us a little bit more about where to find the Savi apps.
Yeah, so the book's available anywhere books are sold. You can go to darksideoftheboom.com, or you can just go to Amazon or bookshop.org, wherever you like to buy books. The Scamwise is available at scamwise.com. Bookmark it, show your parents how to use it. We've received so much feedback from sandwich generation folks who said that it's been really helpful with my parents and giving them a tool to check their own scam. So use Scamwise. It's totally free. You don't have to worry about privacy or protection around the user data because we don't even ask you for an email. So check that out. And then if you want to do more, go to savicurity.com, savisecurity.com, and you can find more information about the apps that we launched there.
Well, thank you for this conversation, Patrick. I think it's just another great discussion, just like you said, for that sandwich generation. When you're in the messy money middle, the obligations, responsibilities, and things you just want to do to protect yourself and the people you love often grow. And this is was a great discussion as far as I'm concerned for exactly that.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you for listening to the Women's Money Wisdom podcast. If you found value in this episode, the best way that you can support the podcast is to forward an episode to a friend or leave a review. Go to proplan.com and the podcast link to get all the resources and links mentioned. This presentation by Pearl Planning is intended for general information purposes only. No portion of this presentation serves as the receipt of or a substitute for personal investment advice from Pearl Planning or any other investment professional of your choosing. Copies of Pearl Planning's current written disclosure brochure and Form CRS discussing our advisory services and fees are available upon request or on our website platform at pearlplan.com. The information that we share is meant to educate and inspire, not serve as personalized financial advice. Everyone's situation is unique, so be sure to consult with your own financial professional for guidance that fits your life. And just so you know, the opinions shared in this podcast are Melissa's own and those of her guests. They don't necessarily represent any organizations with which Melissa is affiliated. For more important disclosures, please go to our webpage at pearlplan.com.